Okay, well, here we are for day two, and this is part two of our series on getting started in Adobe Fresco. Now, yesterday I covered basics of the app, which included the home screen and the general lay of the land for everybody. When you open the app and when you get into your drawing screen, your canvas, what the brushes do. Okay, we covered brushes in a lot of detail. We're still going to do a bit more of that today with some special techniques and things like that. We talked about exporting the image that you create. We talked about setting up your document, and we talked a little bit about the layers and the layer actions that we have, just a few of them. And that was pretty much it. We also talked a little bit about the color picker and didn't get too heavily into brush settings. We were able to touch a little bit on smudge. I might do a bit more with that today as well. Now, I'm going to run down the list of remaining tools that we have in our toolbar today, and that's going to be the first 25-30 minutes of this episode. And then after that, I want to show you some more advanced techniques that you may not be familiar with. And these are going to include some pretty nifty things like how to use vector shapes in your art, how to create brushes and shapes in Adobe Capture that you can use as assets in your work, as well as creating instant custom brushes inside a document with the multicolor eyedropper. This is something you can't do anywhere else, and it's a pretty neat feature and one that I like to show off quite a lot. So with that said, it's time to get cooking. All right, so let me share my screen here. You'll see I'm just posting on Twitter that I'm live. I hope folks are going to pay attention and watch. Gosh, if they don't, they're going to miss out. But fortunately, this is recorded. And what's nice about that is you can watch any of these Adobe Live episodes anytime at Behance. But you can also go to the Creative Cloud YouTube page and you can watch years worth of content there. We're talking thousands of hours of amazing tutorials and guest artists coming to speak at Adobe Live and anything you could ever need there. So check that out as well. All right, well, let's continue. Now, yesterday we left off with the smudge tool, and I want to now move on to this remaining half of the toolbar here on the left, and we're going to start with the move tool. Now, it says the layer is empty. Well, the move tool does what it says. It moves things, okay? But it's a little more than that as well. So I need to have something on the layer to move around. And since this layer is blank, I'll just go ahead and I'll select a brush. Let's see. It's been a while since I actually drew anything with the canvas brush. So I think I'll do that. People think about painting tools in the painting category as just being painting tools, but you can make them smaller and you can draw with them and get some pretty nifty looking lines. So I think I'll do that right now. Yeah, check it out. Not bad as a line art tool. This is that canvas brush, right? Okay, so now I have something on the page. All right, if I want to move it, I tap on the move tool. Now that is the little arrow just underneath the smudge tool that has a crisscross icon next to it with arrows at the ends. And you'll see that once I tap on that tool, I'm presented with this bounding box, this blue box, we call that a bounding box, around the layer contents, okay? Now, tapping on the corner and pulling away is going to resize the art. Pushing inwards is going to make it smaller. Pulling outwards is going to make it larger, okay? You can also distort it by pulling on the little circles you see. These are called anchors in the middle. Okay, so we have the corner ones, and then we have the ones in the middle on the left, right, top, and bottom. And that's going to distort what I'm doing here, right? I can do it the same way this way. And then you'll notice that there's a handle at the very top of the box. And it's a little line popping off of that center top circle with another little circle at the top of that. Now that anchor, if I grab it, allows me to rotate. And you'll notice that as I get close to 0 degrees, right around within 2 degrees, it'll snap. This is to ensure that I can easily get back to a perfect 0, 90, 180 angle if I need things to be precise. Now, this is one of those things where we want to give you a lot of control over how you use the app. And so yesterday when I was talking about the settings this is one of the things that you can turn on or off, this snapping feature that we're looking at here, okay? Now, before I get to that though, I want you to notice that there is also, see this? I'm dragging this around right now on the screen. This is a little handy tool we have that appears on screen only when you're using the Move tool that allows you to nudge whatever you've selected in tiny increments, basically pixel by pixel, okay? And so if I tap on the right one, I'm just repeatedly tapping on it, you can see that what's happening is it is nudging it to the right. And that's pretty handy, right? I can nudge it to the left, I can nudge it up and down. So if you're doing some really precise stuff, then of course this is going to be quite handy for you, right? All right, now jumping back to what I was talking about with settings. I'll just cancel out of this for a moment. Settings, if you'll remember, are in the top right of the screen. I'm just going to tap on that settings right there. And you'll see about halfway down in that menu, rotation snapping. Now, there are a couple things here. One, you can decide when is it going to snap, every 30 degrees, every 45, every 90. So you can, of course, decide where you want that to be. But if you don't want any snapping at all, you simply turn that off. Okay. Now with that off, I want you to see what happens when I now try and rotate this. You will see that there is no snapping occurring, which means if I wanted to rotate it from 0 to negative 1.2, negative 1.1, right? I could do it. And I love that the actual degrees are shown right on screen in the middle there. You can see them moving. So that's really handy as well. All right, we'll undo that, cancel out of that. I'll turn that snapping on because I use it and I like it. So there it is. All right, now, what else can you do with the Move tool? Well, you can move parts of the layer, all right, instead of the entire thing. But how do you do that? How do you select a part of the layer that you want to move or transform? That brings us to the tool just beneath the Move tool, and this is your selection tool. Now, you'll notice that several of the tools in Fresco, as we've seen before, have a little arrow at the bottom right of the icon for that tool. And what that's telling me is that there are more options for me to consider that are nested in there. So if I tap on it one more time, you'll see now that I have 4 different selection tools to choose from. We'll start with this first one. This is called the lasso tool, all right? And the way you use the lasso tool is you simply tap on the canvas and start to draw a selection, okay? So maybe I just want to select the eye and that mouth. Once I complete that selection, once I close the lasso as it's called, which means I draw all the way back to where I started. So let me do that again so you can see. I can draw. I can actually stop drawing, lift up my stylus or my pencil and, scratch my face. And then I can resume right where I left off and keep going. All right, so this time I think I'll get the nose and the mouth. There we go. Now, nothing happens until I make it back to that black circle where I started my selection. So when I get back there and let go, you'll see what happens. It closes that selection. And now we have what's called an active selection. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see, look, transform. Well, I've seen that icon before because it's right above the lasso tool. So if I were to tap on that, I can do what I've done before, okay? I did a 2-finger tap to undo, cancel out of that for a moment. We also have the option to erase what I've selected. So if I tap on erase, it goes away. Goodbye. We also have the option to mask what I've selected. We haven't yet talked about masks. That'll come later, but you'll see how that works. We have the option to deselect, which means I don't want this selection anymore. I want to do something else, okay? And then we have more options. And the transform selection is where if I made a selection, I decide, well, I want to make that exact selection that I've made slightly larger, slightly smaller. Not the contents of what I'm selecting, but the actual selection itself. So just to demonstrate, if I tap on transform selection, when I now use that bounding box, you'll see that it is transforming the selection, not the layer contents. Okay, so we'll cancel out of that. You also have the option to invert your selection. What this means is if I decide I want to select everything in the illustration except for the right eye. Well, watch this. I'll select the right eye. Okay, now I want to select everything outside of that selection. I want to invert that selection. So I'll come over here, my more options, and I'll tap on invert selection. Now, watch what happens when I use the move tool. Oh, it's selected everything except the eye. Okay, so that makes sense. Alrighty, now that is what happens with the lasso tool. Now what we've done with the lasso tool is we've combined the traditional lasso tool from Photoshop along with what is called the polygonal, not sure how you say it, lasso tool. And we've made them one tool now. So if I were to draw a selection like this, a curvilinear selection, and then I decide I want to use straight lines in part of my selection, instead of continuing to make contact with the screen and draw continuously, I'll just tap on different parts of the screen, and this allows me to draw a straight line from each point where I tap, and then I can complete the selection. So you have that ability as well with that lasso tool. Very handy indeed. All right, let's deselect that. And let's look at our other options we have as well. This is a painting selection tool. Now the painting selection tools allow you to actually paint in the area that you want to select. So again, if I want to select the left eye, for example, I can simply paint over that, and you'll see that it starts to build a little selection for me. Maybe I want to add the hair, so I just keep painting over that, and now I've added the hair as well. Now some of you might be wondering, well, sometimes you might make a mistake. How would I fix that? All right, if you look at the bottom of our toolbar here on the left, you'll notice that when I have the selection tool selected, this little toolbar here, which normally has my brush settings, for example, if I'm using the brushes, now has two options for me. One has what look like two squares that are combined with one another, and the one beneath it has what looks like two squares that are overlapping one another, and you can see a separation between the two. The first, which is highlighted in blue, which means this is the mode that I'm using for the tool, is a mode of combining selections. So every time I start drawing on the canvas, I'm adding to my selection. Now, if I tap on the mode beneath it, right here, the very last one there, you'll see that that is now highlighted. That now allows me to remove parts of my selection. So you can erase your selection. Now this works for any of the selection tools, same with the lasso tool and so on, okay? So this means it's very easy to control exactly what areas of your canvas you're selecting, okay? So that is the second mode. And now let's deselect and go to the third, which is the rectangular selection tool, which, as you might expect, does what it says, makes rectangles. Now, if I tap and drag, like so, right, it's going to select whatever I have made a square of. And you can see this could be very good for precision work if you want to, or maybe you want to draw some buildings and things like that. And I'll show you how to use paintbrushes and the paint bucket tool in just a moment with selections, which is very handy. All right, now that's the rectangular marquee tool, or rectangular selection tool we call it here in Fresco. Okay, you can continue to add selections that way. And again, you can remove them using that secondary mode, right? So there you go. Deselect that. What if you want to make a perfect square? Well, remember our good friend here, the touch modifier that I'm dragging around the screen here? If I hold the touch modifier down and draw, look what happens. It constrains the proportions of that rectangle so that it is a perfect square. And that's very useful. And just like the rectangular selection tool, we have an elliptical selection tool. It looks like a circle, and that allows me to make these ellipses, right? And of course, with the touch modifier, holding it down, you guessed it, now I get a perfect circle. Very nice. All right, now, one thing people like to do is they like to paint inside of selections. And so this is really handy. So let's see, maybe I want to make like a cool moon. So I will make a perfect circle. Alrighty. I'll then remove part of that circle. And how do you do that? Here you go. Down here, I'm going to change the mode. right there, okay? And I'm going to then hold that circle down again, that touch modifier, and remove part of the circle. So there I have a nice crescent moon, okay? And I'll grab a spongy brush. We'll go to the FX category, and here's that sponge down at the bottom. It's a really fun one. And I'll paint one layer there and then just add some texture with it, and voila, there's a nice cratered moon for you in a matter of seconds. Painting inside the selection means you're only going to paint in the area of the canvas that is actively selected. So lots of people are more shape-based illustrators, and they use the selection tool all the time, and they will make their illustrations this way, where they'll use maybe a big textured brush of some kind, and they'll basically assemble the illustration, if you will, by combining different shapes. And of course, to keep things safe, you want to do this on a lot of different layers so that you can freely move those shapes around and edit them and so on. Okay, so that is really the basics of the selection tool and the move tool. Now, while I've got you thinking about the selections, let's go ahead and make another shape right here. Okay, and what if I just want to fill it with solid color and I don't want to bother painting it in? Well, just beneath the selection tool, you see we have a paint bucket tool, it's called. Whatever your foreground color is, right, if you select the paint bucket tool and you come to an area that's selected and simply tap on it, it's going to fill it with that color. Simple as that. If you're on a vector layer, it will fill it with a vector shape in that selection that you've made. If you're on a pixel layer, it's going to fill it with pixels, and that of course means it is not infinitely scalable. You're on a pixel layer, so you're going to see those pixels, right? And if I were just to hide this for a moment and come to a brand new blank layer, make a circle again, and then select the paint bucket tool to tap and fill, look what happens. Because this is a new layer, Fresco wants to determine whether or not this is going to be a vector layer or a raster layer. And so it shows me these options. So now if I select vector, that is now a vector fill. I can zoom in and you can see, of course, that is now a vector shape. Okay, and that is essentially how the paint bucket tool works. Now, there are options for the paint bucket tool. Hide this for a moment, come back to this layer. And when you're on a pixel layer, you can control how much of a color area you want to fill with the paint bucket tool if you're not making a selection. What I mean by this is, let me show you. I will grab another brush and we'll use the Blair brush for this. And I'll grab another color, just paint across it like that, okay? Now, what if I decide I'd like that red to be a different color? If I grab the paint bucket tool, and let's say I grab this blue here, and I just tap on the area of the canvas that is red, it will try and fill all those pixels that are red with blue. But you'll notice that I missed a few, right? Out there in the edges of what is being anti-aliased. So in order to correct for that, I can open up these options here and increase the color margin. So let's say I go to 100, okay? And then I try again. All right, a little better that time. So I can then say, all right, why don't we try a little more? 150, let's try 100, or maybe 130, let's try 130. Oh, so close. So I think I'll try like 150, see how that goes. Pretty darn good, couple of tiny little red bits here and there, but for the most part, that seems to do the trick. So, you know, I could fiddle with that and I could get it to a point where hopefully I'd be able to hit that magic number where it fills. Now, see, that's dangerous right there. You go too far, because those colors are somewhat close to each other on the color wheel, you could wind up filling everything. So 150 seemed to be about the best I could do. 155, yeah, pretty good. So that is that's how the paint bucket tool works if you're not using a selection. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kyle, come on. There's got to be a better way. And there is. And I'm proud to tell you and excited to tell you that the Fresco team is working on several new fill options and some new innovations when it comes to filling areas of your canvas, of a layer. And these are going to be rolled out in 2021, piece by piece. And I think you're going to love them. They are going to take things to a nice new place for digital artists and open up some new possibilities for how you're able to fill. And this is going to be pretty neat. For the meantime, this is what we have. I know it's not ideal, and believe me, we're going to make it a pretty great experience. So stick with it and wait until you see what we've got, because as much as I'd love to spoil it and show everybody what we have, I am not allowed to do that because I could get in big trouble. However, cool stuff is coming. Now, let me see if we have any questions up until this point. I do see Depeche Mode being mentioned. Whatever that is, I'm glad it's in there. I have no idea what it's relating to. Tim is eating some waffles. Tim, I'm so glad to hear that. I love waffles. Let's see. Airbrush. Are you asking about maybe do we have an airbrush in Fresco? Well, we do have some pretty nifty brushes from the, as I mentioned yesterday, your libraries. All your libraries just show up in Fresco, all your brush libraries. And one of them is that wonderful Keith Haring library of brushes that was released a couple months ago. It's still available, I think, and it's free, so go grab it, folks. The Keith Haring brushes are pretty cool. And there's some spray paint brushes in there that I love to use. So look at that. Ooh, yeah. Look at all that fantastic spray. You can just go crazy with it, or you can go really fine with it. You can just really blow it out, right? So you want to control your line, no problem. You want to go crazy, no problem. So that might kind of satisfy some of you airbrush folks out there. But you can also import your own airbrushes that you've made in Fresco, right? Alrighty, hey, Rico's here. Rico, everybody. Rico, amazing colorist and artist. Rico, I was wearing your awesome t-shirt yesterday. He has the best t-shirt I've ever seen in the history of the universe. It's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer t-shirt, but it says Slayer with the logo from the rock group Slayer. So it's just one of the most clever mashups I've ever seen. Go check out Rico's work. I'm sure you're already familiar with it. I mean, if you haven't heard of a tiny little title called Spider-Gwen, colorist on that, along with Squirrel Girl and some other gems. Thanks for hanging out with us, Rico, celebrity in the gang here. Alrighty, Vihan, nice to see you. You're from India. I went to New Delhi when I was 9 years old. It's been a while. Okay, gang, let's carry on. So that's a paint bucket tool. Now we come to an interesting one. This is the shape tool, just beneath the paint bucket tool, the shape tool. All right, now at first glance, you think, okay, I get it. Sure, you want to make some shapes, right? So if we tap on that, you'll see a couple of things here. At the very top, we have basic shapes. And sure enough, you got your circle, your square, and your polygons, and you can increase the number of sides on that polygon up to 8. Okay, now this is well and good. You want to make a quick circle, and I just put something on the canvas. You can fill it. You notice at the very bottom of the screen I have my options again. I like how these options pop up when you need them and they're gone when you don't, so your canvas doesn't get all cluttered. So there you go, I filled the circle. Okay, great. You want to do another one? No problem, fill it. Okay. Look at this though. What is Kyle doing there? How am I constraining the exposition? All right, let's talk about that. So we talked about the touch modifier being useful for lots of things. Well, maybe you want to draw a car, all right, and you just want to keep it simple. Do one little wheel right there. And you want to do the next wheel. We want to make sure that they are lined up with one another, horizontally speaking, right, vertically speaking. And if you hold down the touch modifier, here it is, and then just drag your shape over to the right or to the left, okay? Then you can simply, whoops, I just tapped on I did undo by accident. Then you can simply tap and fill, and then you could drag it up and fill, and you could drag it down and fill. You get the idea. So that is a nice little precision thing we have going on there with the touch modifier. You know, it does all kinds of handy things. All right, but getting back to the shape tool and the basics of this tool. In addition to simply making shapes, which is great, and yes, you can make, different transformations of those shapes, okay? But in addition to doing this, let me come back to that menu because I want you to notice something. If I pop out of here, we have basic shapes, but then we have library shapes. So this is one of those more advanced things I wanted to talk to you about, these cool hidden gems that we have in the app. Now, if you've never used vector shapes, these can be created via Adobe Capture, which is another free app that you can grab for your phone, for your iPad. I believe we have it for Android as well. And it allows you to create vector shapes along with lots of other really cool stuff, brushes and patterns and surface textures and color themes, to mention a few. But you can also create shapes out of Illustrator, any vector app where you can create a vector shape. And if you save it to a Creative Cloud library, and remember, libraries are like these suitcases, these virtual suitcases that just travel with you everywhere you go. Any computer, any device, any iPad that you log into with your Creative Cloud account, you have access to all of your libraries, and your libraries can contain things like brushes and color themes and vector shapes and image assets, photography, etc. Fonts, all kinds of things. And those libraries, when they're available to you, will just show up magically in Fresco. And so I was going to show you how to create vector shapes and then watch as they just appear here in Fresco. All right. And just to show you a couple things I have here. Here is a vector shape. And you'll notice that as I tap on any shape, it just shows up on the canvas. Okay. But here's a vector shape that I made, for example, by photographing just a leaf from a plant in our house. And I'll zoom in so you can see that. That is vector art. I made it in a matter of seconds. I took a photo, I opened it in Capture, created a vector asset. It showed up in Fresco. And so now I have this leaf that I could place wherever I like and resize. Remember, it's vector, so it's infinitely scalable. I could fill it with color. If I want this to be a vector layer, sure. Fill it with vector color. And now look at that. There's my leaf. Really cool. And what I did was I took photos of this leaf, a photo of a flower, a rose in the front yard, and another leaf photo. And I was able to then create this illustration, which I will find for you here. This illustration. Now let me just hide all that type for a moment. Goodbye. All right, now this illustration, as you can see, takes advantage of that leaf shape down here at the bottom. And all I did was draw this little character up here. This is all vector. And there's that flower. You can see how easy it is to work with shapes and work them into your art. And I did this all by bouncing back and forth between Capture and Fresco. Pretty nice. All right, so back to our demo. Yes, I am enjoying Fresco. Thanks for asking. Okay, back to our demo. So in just a moment, I will show you how to create these shapes. I did want to show you that they exist. They're right here. If I tap on shapes, I can go to my libraries and they all just show up, right? These are 2 illustrations my kids did that are going to be launched to the moon. Pretty interesting little project there. I had some interesting shapes I created for Max. A Wolverine here that was originally drawn with pixel brushes, for example. And you can see that has been converted to a vector shape. Now I just filled it with pixels, so of course it's now no longer vector, but I could fill it with vector as well. I liked what happened with the halftone patterns I used when they became vectorized. I used that for the body hair and for the pattern on the pants there. Pretty nifty stuff. Anyway, lots of interesting things to experiment with. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But first I want to run down the rest of this list. So text. Just beneath the shapes we have text. Text is exactly what you would expect if you've used any of other apps or any apps that have text. All you do is tap and drag on the canvas, okay? And you're going to start making a text box. See how easy that is? It's always going to fill it with this dummy text, okay? So once I'm done dragging, And of course, I can always modify that anytime I want, don't worry. Over to the right, you will see that I have my options for the font that I'm using, right? The typeface. And there are system fonts, right? But if I tap at the very bottom on more fonts, look at this. And these are all free, folks. Over 1,000 free fonts here, okay? Free fonts. Art Deco, you got comics. Look at this. Comics. Free. These are free, guys. Okay, so you can select, let's just do a comic one. Why not? Why not? Let's see. This is kind of cool. I like that one. Oh, yeah. All right, now I just pull up my keyboard. And let's say, oh, it's got my pen on it. It thinks I want to type because I'm holding my Apple Pencil. Will the exclamation point. Okay, move that over here, resize it, pop it over there. You want to work with your letter spacing. Well, check out this nice new system we have here. If I tap on this letter spacing right here, this little, see this where it says 0 currently? I love this slider over on the left. I can just really tighten that up, right? Very nice. I like to look at that. That's a nice way to do it. You want to work on scaling it up or down. You can do the same thing. These sliders are just a nifty little thing that we've got going on here, and I really enjoy them. Very nice. Okay, you want to center justify it, left justify it, right justify it. These are all things that you would expect, of course. Now, maybe the several thousand fonts we have for free just aren't going to cut it for you. Well, if that's the case, you needn't worry, because we just open up those fonts again. You also have the option at the very, very, very bottom. Wow, there's just too many here. This is crazy. Let me go back to my main menu. You'll see at the very bottom it says, thousands of fonts from Adobe Fonts are included with a subscription to Creative Cloud. Want to keep exploring? Open Creative Cloud Mobile. So if you open Creative Cloud there, you can then browse the, 16,000 fonts on Adobe Fonts, Adobe Type. And you can select any of those to load into Fresco and work with. And it's as simple as just turning them on or off. So that is really cool as well. If you haven't tried Adobe Illustrator on iPad, same kind of deal. Alrighty. So you also have some options for opacity, okay, and blend modes like any other layer. All right, we didn't talk about blend modes yet, but we'll get there. All right, now that is the basics of type in Fresco. Very easy to work with. Once I've made my type, if I feel like distorting it, I can use the move tool and I can transform it, right? So maybe I want to make it more condensed. I know all the type folks out there are saying, Kyle, don't do that. That's just bad, 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 bad. I know. But in this case, with this kind of a font, I think I'm safe. Just doing some minor modifications. Nobody's going to notice. Now that text layer will remain an active text layer in your layer stack on the right, and you'll see a little T to the left of that layer, so you know for sure that text is active. Maybe you've done your text and you say, okay, I know I'm not going to edit this anymore. I'm happy with it. It's done. I'm never going to want to edit it again. And now I want to do some special effects with it. I want to paint on top of it or paint inside it as a selection or some cool things like that. What you do is you just tap on that layer. And at the bottom it says convert to pixel layer. See that? Oh, but you can also convert it to a vector layer. Pretty neat. I'll convert it to a pixel layer. There. Once I do that, the little icon on the layer changes. It's no longer a little T. Now it just shows me that little pixel square, and I know it's pixel layer. And I could do things like tap on it, and I could say, for example, load as selection, which is near the bottom, third one up. And what that does is it selects. See that? I made a selection of the text. I make a layer above it. Maybe grab another brush. Yeah, I could use that spray paint brush, and let's just kind of spray around in there. Like that. Cool. See? All right. So much fun. So that's the text tool. Now underneath that, we have the eyedropper. Well, the eyedropper we already know about because we've already learned the shortcut for it using our finger, simply tapping anywhere on the screen. Okay? But if you want to use the eyedropper this way and just select the actual tool and move it around, it does exactly the same thing. And if you want to use the multicolor eyedropper instead of using that keyboard shortcut we have, pardon me, the touch shortcut, right? Using our little touch modifier here. So if I want to do something with multiple colors, and I'll pull up a part of the illustration that has multiple colors, like this, for example. Maybe I want to select that yellow and that red together. Just tap on at the very bottom. You'll see here, remember my little toolbar that changes with every tool we select? There's the multicolor one. See underneath it, it has four, like a pie, it has divided into fourths. And now, of course, I can select, those four colors at once. All right, makes sense? Okay, you get the idea. And now I have a multicolor swatch. So if I go back to Paint, it's using that swatch. All righty. Okay, now why don't we just hide some of this stuff, and we're going to get to some new things here. All right, now this brings us to photography. Right underneath the eyedropper, you'll see this nice little, what looks like a little image. See, like a mountain range, a little sun, or it could be a moon. I don't know what time of day it is. And here you can take a photo with your device, so just aim it, snap a picture, and it's going to immediately show up here, and you can start using it as a layer. You can bring in photos from your photo reel. You can also bring in files from, say, Dropbox, for example. You can bring in files directly from your Creative Cloud files, right? So why don't we just open up Photos for a moment, and let's bring in this little polar bear. Okay, there he is. Simple as that. You just place it, gives you the option to decide where to go, how big it is. Okay, when you say done, there it goes. Now, there's a difference with this layer. This is an image that we have imported into our layer stack. And so if you look at the layer over on the right, you'll notice that it actually has a separate icon, which is a miniature version of that same photo icon we saw before, right? The little landscape with the sun or moon. If you want to use this as a regular pixel layer, what you do is you tap on it and you convert it to pixel layer like we did with the type at the very bottom. All right, now let me show you what's interesting though about a photo layer like this. I am going to take it and drag it off the screen. Ah, look at this. You can place it outside your canvas. Now this is great for artists who use reference because I can now keep that layer there as a reference layer. And then let's say, I'm just learning how to draw polar bears and I want to use it as reference and say, okay, so now I want to figure out the shape of that head. All right, yep, there's that nose. Okay, I'm just kind of roughing this out and figuring out how a polar bear looks. So this is going to be my reference image, right? And this will help me then to draw what I need. I've got my reference photos out there and I can start doing my drawing. All righty, so that is really great. You can pile up a bunch of reference photos all around the outside of your canvas and you can start working. So that's a handy thing. So if you keep it as a photo and don't convert it to a pixel layer, this is what will happen, okay? All right, so another thing I want to show you with this. Let's hide that for a moment and we'll delete this little guy. Bye-bye. Let's bring in another photo. Come to Photos, and I'm going to go to Albums and go to, I think it's called Flowers. Here we go, Flowers. Alrighty, and let's select this one. All right, it places that photo on my canvas. And I can say, okay, done. Now check this out. I'll take the photo, convert it to a pixel layer, at the very bottom here, convert it. So now it's just a regular pixel layer. And let me show you, you might remember yesterday with the live brushes, with the oils, that with the oil paints, you can suck all the color out of the brush. And it felt kind of like a weird thing to do, just to be able to mix stuff on canvas. But let me show you why that's useful here. So I've got the oil paint round, and with my color wheel, remember the bottom right corner? Just tap that little transparent circle, okay? I'm gonna turn the mixing value way up and the thickness of the paint way up. I'll come over here and watch this. Let me make my brush a little smaller so you can see this. See what I'm doing? I'm just touching any area of the photo and painting on top of it. But I'm not actually painting with any preloaded color. I'm just using whatever colors are already in the image and just pushing them around. So what I'm talking about here, friends, is the ability to take any one of your photos and sort of magically convert it into an oil painting just by using the oil brush like this and painting on top of your photo. Pretty cool, right? You want to do a nice sort of impressionistic sort of piece. Look at all that thick paint. You can see all the lines of the paint. I love that. Scrub it here and there, right? You can make it as loosey-goosey as you want or as precise as you want. You could use that finer oil brush. We have the oil paint detail brush, for example. If you want to get like smaller lines in there, push it around. Pretty cool trick. Not a lot of folks know about it, so always happy to show this one off. And sometimes this blows people's minds. They're like, oh my gosh, cheating. I can just take a photo of something and then turn it into an oil painting, right? And of course, I'm doing a very rushed job of it here, but you get the idea. Let's come over to the leaves where there's more color here. You can see how this is going to work, right? Ooh, very pretty, pretty, pretty. Remember, I don't have to do anything except move my brush on top of the photo. And this is what happens, right? So people think, dang, you're a good painter when you show them the final result. And you say, yes, I am. You can lie. It's okay. It's a white lie. Nobody gets hurt. Isn't that fun? So that's a pretty cool trick. Mallory says, don't share this technique in a digital art group on Facebook. People will rip your head off. You know what? This is just a trick, and it doesn't make anybody, you know, a better artist or worse artist or this. I mean, if you want to be a good photographer, you want to be a good painter, you got to go through the trouble of actually learning how to do that stuff well and do it properly. But if you want it for fun, go ahead and do something like this and do it in an artful way. Why not? Nobody gets hurt. Right? Take advantage of the tools you have and do the best you can and so on. But yeah, I hear you. I understand. Pretty fun though, right? All right, so there's that little trick I thought I'd show you. So again, remember, you can bring in photos from anywhere, plop them right here into the app and work with them. And folks, guess what? That covers the toolbar for us. Now remember that we did jump briefly yesterday into brush settings, and we don't have enough time today for me to go really, really deep into brush settings, but I will say that much like Photoshop, you can control how the brush responds to pressure and tilt and scattering and all these other nice things that you can control for the brush. And I'll get into that just briefly here in a moment, where I'm going to show you something that is a more advanced little trick. And that is using the multicolor eyedropper tool to make custom brushes. Now, a couple of ways to go with this with custom brushes. I mentioned Adobe Capture, right? So with Adobe Capture, we have some pretty nifty things you can do. And one of them is to be able to make custom brushes. And I will show you the Adobe Capture workflow here in a moment. But since we're right here, just currently working right in Fresco and it's top of mind, I want to show you this neat trick you can do with your multicolor eyedropper. Now you remember the multicolor eyedropper allows us to load multiple colors onto any brush. And so, for instance, if you look here at my color swatches from yesterday's demo, we have a few examples of that. Like this, where I have a brush that has multiple colors on it, okay? And how did I do that? Well, I simply grab some color from my color wheel, put it down, and grab another color, put that down. It doesn't matter how many colors, doesn't matter what's on the canvas, could be anything. And then I hold down my touch modifier, and with my other finger, I just tap anywhere on the canvas, and I'm now selecting a multicolor swatch. See this? Look at the top right. See where it says multiple colors? Now when I paint, woo, pretty cool, right? But that's the tip of the iceberg. As cool as that is, and as useful as that is for all kinds of nifty things, there is more you can do with it than just that. And let me show you what I mean when I talk about making custom brushes. Easiest example I always show is, let's say you got to paint some kind of a little chain necklace or something, or maybe some heavy chains. You're doing a comics page where Conan is in chains, and you know, you got chains around the arms and legs, and there's chains hanging from the cave walls and whatever, okay? So let's just grab black. I'll just grab a simple inker. I'll use the classic comics nib here. All right, we'll just go like this. Just make ourselves a nice kind of chain link here, okay? And I hold down my touch modifier and make sure I get that entire link right in the center. Okay, there we go. I've now selected the chain link for the brush. All right, now what I do is I come into the most basic brush I could get, which is this nice hard round variable brush. See this? And I just come into my brush settings, and look, I've already done it. So I've done this demo so many times. This is what I'm playing with, the spacing of the brush, okay? So I space it so the chain links are touching one another, okay? And I make sure that with my shape dynamics, I'll come down, look at this here. You see we have lots of options here. Don't get too confused by these. Let's look from the third one up. It says shape dynamics. And about, let's see, yeah, 3/4 of the way down, you'll see the word control and then direction. All this is telling me is I want to be able to control this shape, okay, the shape of this stamp, by making it rotate to the direction in which I am drawing. That's all that means. So we have different options here. Direction. Alrighty? And now look, painting with chains. Pretty cool, right? So I'm making some chains here. So do you understand what just happened there? We created a custom brush in just a matter of seconds, right? Now that could be anything. Anything could be a brush, right? And so yesterday I mentioned that we have with the watercolors these 5 options. All right, they're great options, don't get me wrong, but let's say you wanted to paint with a different shape entirely. Well, here, let's go back and let's just select pure black for our color here. And I'll go back to just the inking category here and grab that Belgian Comics brush, for example. Or let's grab something a little crazier. Grungy Inker is a good one. All right, now I'm just going to make a few lines here, random little squiggles. All right, hold down my touch modifier and select some of those. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my watercolor brushes, and I'm going to grab that watercolor wash flat brush. Now look what happens. See that? It's painting with that shape. And remember, you don't have to just paint with the color that you've selected. No, don't worry. You can paint with any color. So I've just created a custom watercolor brush now, and I can change the hue, saturation, and brightness with the HSB sliders right here. So this is not your normal color wheel. These are your hue, saturation, and brightness. So the hue gets changed here, which is the same as that little wheel that we have at the top, the circular wheel you can move around, right? So let's say I want to paint with a nice green and make it a little darker. Okay, there, now I'm painting with that green. All right, use a little less water, increase the flow. And now I'm painting with a custom watercolor brush just like that, right? There's a normal version of that brush. I come back, there in my color history, I have this custom version. So you could do a whole painting like this. You could use custom brushes of any kind using the watercolors. And that's a pretty cool thing, isn't it? And what about oils? What about oils? Guess what? Same thing applies. Same thing applies. Right? Make that bigger so you can see it. See? So you want custom brushes for watercolor and oils? Just make a shape on the canvas and select it with your multicolor eyedropper, and you have a custom brush for your document, and you can paint with it. And that can come in really handy. All right? So that is a pretty cool trick. And because you can select literally any part of the canvas to paint with, you can also do some pretty cool like 3D effects and weird things. I'll give you an example. This is one I always like to do, where I'll grab a paintbrush. Let's just use that canvas brush. There it is. Make it a little bigger. And I'll just grab some yellow. And here, I'm going to make myself a little circular selection. So go to my selection tool. Hold down that touch modifier to make it a perfect circle. And then paint inside that. And go a little bit darker right here for like a little shadow. Okay, so I'm gonna make it like a sphere. Okay, remember the smudge tool? got our smudge tool here. I can just smudge that, make a nice little blending. Okay, remember our core shadow is going to be a little darker than the rest of the shadow, so I want to make sure that I get a shadow here, but not quite as dark as that core shadow. And then I'm going to put in a little highlight. So we'll come back to that yellow that we used. We'll cool it off a little bit. Come over here and paint that right there. Sort of like the lit area, I guess. Not really a highlight, but you get the idea. Hold down my finger and get some white, and then put a little highlight in it. Okay, there's our little sphere. Now, why did I do this? Okay, check it out. Take my touch modifier, hold it down, and select that sphere. Okay, then that has become the active selection I have for my color. All right, it's a multicolor swatch. Going to those basic brushes again, and just getting that hard round brush up at the top. This is a super simple little brush, right? And in my brush settings, look what happens. Look at this, it's crazy. I want to bring that spacing all the way down, okay? And I want to make sure that the size is going to be big enough we can really see what's happening here. I'll hide that for a moment. Now look at that. Isn't that crazy? It's like I'm painting with a 3D tube. And let me go to my settings here and reset them. There we go. I had been fiddling around with that brush and doing some things with opacity. There, that's what it's supposed to look like. Isn't that nuts? Look at that. Woo! And remember, you can change the color. Come into your color wheel, and in the HSB sliders, that stands for hue, saturation, and brightness, just change it to something else and start painting. Woo! That is so fun and so weird. Any questions? Let's see. I want to make sure if anyone's got any questions. Hey, Mercurial, thanks for the mention. Yeah, today, my draw along show is at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, and it's going to be a fun one. As usual, we do all kinds of silly stuff in there. You draw along with me for the first 10 minutes. We draw something fun. That's where that polar bear image came from. That was yesterday's. Sometimes I'll do a little art history, sometimes a little art tip. Sometimes I'll show you one of my favorite art books or illustrated books. And we also do doodle games sometimes. And every episode ends with you suggesting to me something to draw, and I will draw it. And it's an animal doing a crazy activity. That's how we constrain it there. And those have been really fun. Yesterday we did a beaver trying to start a chainsaw. You guys come up with the greatest suggestions. So that really kind of does it for that multicolor eyedropper trick. Now let's get into that capture vector shapes and capture brushes thing that I mentioned earlier, because it is so cool. And you can only do it in Fresco, so, you know, it's exclusive. Let's do it. All right, starting with, I want to make a brush, and I want to make it in Fresco, and I want to use it right away, and I want it in a library. I want. I sound like Veruca Salt, if you haven't seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Alrighty, let's see. What's an example? Okay, so maybe I want to do like, I'll use a better brush than this. This is just a boring old basic brush. I use the Blotty ink brush. Oh no, I know what I'll do. I'll use a, let's go to the dry media category and grab the rough pencil. Okay. So maybe for whatever reason, I want to create a brush that's going to be living in a library. I can use it in any document, whether in Photoshop or in Fresco. And I want that brush to be just a brush that paints these dashes that are kind of like hollow and kind of like that. Like that's what I want. That's as simple, right? That's what I want. Okay, so what do I do? Well, look. Just take a little screenshot of that. Right, that's easy. Just capture a little screenshot. If you're on an iPad, it's, you know, you hold down a couple buttons at once. It's different for the different iPad models, but just take a screenshot. If you don't want to take a screenshot, go ahead and do a quick export of that image. It'll save it to your camera roll. And then I pop on over to Adobe Capture. Adobe Capture. Rasa. Okay. In Adobe Capture, you have your various libraries. These are your Creative Cloud libraries, okay? And look, you have all your assets in those libraries. You have different types of assets, shapes, etc. At the far right, you'll see brushes. So I want to add a new brush, and all I have to do is tap on the plus symbol at the bottom of the screen. It's a little blue bar that has a plus symbol and a camera. You can take a photo right away, or you can simply use the plus sign. And I think I'll do import image from my camera roll. And there's that image I just took, right? So what it does is it brings it up right here, and I say, yeah, that's the one I want. I can play with the darkness and lightness of it, but in this case, since it's just a black image, it's not going to matter, black and white. I say, okie dokie. And right away, it's like, okay, let's make that a brush. Okay? But I say, wait a second, I want to crop that. This is the part I want. That's the brush I want right there. Okay? You can narrow that down if you want. And I say, this is what I want to paint with. That's the shape I want. Now for settings, it can be a directional brush. And by the way, we have brushes here that you can create called ribbon brushes, which I'll show you, which are just crazy. And that's under style. So you have Photoshop and Fresco brushes. There are some presets in here for spacing. And this is actually pretty close to what I want in ribbon brush format. You can test your brush, see what it does. All right. I kind of like the way that one works as a ribbon brush, frankly. And ribbon brushes work in Fresco and nowhere else. They're pretty clever. But there's a lot more you can do with them. But in the meantime, you know, it could also stretch it. Ooh, look at that. How cool is that, gang? Isn't that neat? You know what? I think I like that. I was going to just make a standard Photoshop brush. And you could. Look, Photoshop and Fresco brushes. You click on one. This one's pressure sensitive. You know, you want to mess with the angle settings and the spacing and how it responds to pen pressure and all those kinds of things. You can do that here too, right? You want to turn pressure on or off for how it's going to affect size, and you can do jitter, you know, size jitter. You want to make a kind of a bumpy brush with some angle jitter and things like that. It's like a little brush studio for yourselves. But I have to tell you, I like that. I liked that capture ribbon brush that stretched. That was fun. So that's the one I want. So if that's the brush I like, I go to settings. I make it bigger. Yeah, that's cool. Say save. And look, there it is, brush 8. And I'm not going to call it anything special because it's just a demo. I'll save it to my Max 2020 library. It shows up, bang, just like that. There it is. And it'll take probably a minute because my kids are both doing homeschool through the computer with their teachers right now. And it's just a crazy situation. We're all living here with the COVID, but everyone's on the network at the same time. Hopefully, though, it'll update my library fairly soon. So if I go to my libraries, I can go to that Max 2020 library. Max 2020. There it is. Holy cow. Oh, that's a different one from the other day. Sorry. I didn't call it test. All right, just waiting there. Oh, brush 8. It did come in. Ta-da! Look at that. Now I'm painting with that cool brush. Isn't that crazy? You just make a brush like that. It takes 2 seconds. And since we're already talking about ribbon brushes, well, hey, a ribbon brush can be made out of anything. It can be a photo of yourself. In fact, who would be so vain as to make a brush that is a photo of themselves? Well, the answer is me. And so look at this funny brush I made. Just paint myself. I can make myself taller because I'm a short guy in real life, right? So I could just make myself nice and tall. And I can also do weird things like that. Because with ribbon brushes, you give the brush a head, a body, and a tail. Go back to capture here for a moment, and you will see what I'm talking about. So here's that Kyle brush we're just looking at there. And if I were to edit that brush, the bottom right corner, right, you can see that under the cropping, you select where the head, the body, and the tail are. I want to give myself extra long arms. That looks totally weird, right? Look at that. That's so weird. Or maybe I want my face to stretch along with, it's just the head's going to stretch. That just looks insane, right? Maybe I just want my feet to stretch. That just looks weird. See what I'm talking about? Head, body, and tail for the brush. Now, of course, you're going to do this in a more practical way, right? Nobody's that crazy. Alrighty, so you get the idea. These are really versatile, and if you want to look at a practical way to use them, well, check this out. I took photos of trees in my backyard, and I made these tree bark brushes so I can paint. These are full RGB brushes, right? So it's full color. So I make that brush really big, just paint a little trunk right here. These are responding to pen pressure as well, by the way. Make it a little smaller, come out here, paint a little branch. This could create a whole new art style. And for those of you who haven't seen my Red Riding Hood demo, that's how I used those brushes, was to paint this little forest scene with Red Riding Hood. Now, let's see if I can find that for you all. It's here somewhere. I just have too many illustrations. That's the problem. Oh gosh. Well, it's here somewhere. Maybe I zoomed past it and I didn't see it. But I painted a little forest scene with those different trees. Of course, creating those brushes just took a matter of seconds, as you've seen how easy that is to do in Capture. No big deal, right? Yeah, so couldn't be easier. Alrighty, those are ribbon brushes. That's the Capture workflow for creating brushes. Now, what about vector shapes? Alrighty, so check this out. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to show you a cool thing you can do, which is to create vector art out of any illustration that you make, even if that illustration is done with pixel brushes, of course. So I'm going to grab a pixel brush here. We'll go to the charcoal, and I'll use just a charcoal pencil. All right, now let's say that I'm just going to do this character here. Alrighty. This is Mr. Mustachio. All right, he's got a double chin and a big mustachio and weird spiky hair. Okay. Alrighty. Now, let's say some client who obviously is a little sick in the head because they can't see so well says, we want Mr. Mustachio to be our mascot for our brand. Why would that ever be? I don't know. And I say, yeah, but the problem is I drew him, with just charcoal pencil on a piece of tissue paper in my studio. I was just kind of fooling around. They say, we don't care. We like him just the way he is, and that's what we want. And I say, well, all right, I guess I could go into, Illustrator and trace him out or something, or redraw it, whatever. Well, you don't have to do that. Just go ahead and export that image, right? Or take a screenshot like I did before. And open up Capture, and let's go back to our libraries, and here under shapes, okay, at the top, shapes, I just say, yeah, I want to add a new shape. Let's import an image from the camera roll like last time. That's the guy. It's what I want. And look at that. I can increase or decrease the black value there. Say, yeah, okay, I want that. And looks good to me. Save it. Save it. Pops it in the shapes. I come back over to Fresco, and I open up my shapes, remember, over here, and I go to Max 2020, and look who's there. It's Mr. Mustachio, right? I say, let's put that guy in a new layer and fill it with vector, yeah. Okay, and just like that, bang, look, perfect vector art. I love how it takes all those bits of texture from the pixel brush and converts them into a vector shape, which is, of course, infinitely scalable. So now they can slap it on the front of their restaurant, the size 4 feet by 6 feet or whatever. No worries, it's vector art. I converted it in just a couple of seconds, and you're all set. So that's it. You make your shapes, you're good to go. Okay, I made a cool shape library, for example, for Halloween. Let's go over here. See this? The Halloween pack. I drew all of these with a basic thick to thin brush. which is one of the inking brushes in Fresco. And all I did was bring them in Capture to trace them into shapes so they could be infinitely scalable Halloween shapes for everybody, like a sticker set, you know? Probably my favorite is this Wolfman. I like him. He's fun. But that's all it took to make that work, okay? So that's a pretty advanced and pretty cool little trick you can do as well. All right, I'm gonna pause here to look to see if we have any questions. I dare you to paint something with the Kyle brush. Well, gosh, I don't know what I'd paint. Howard says, so fancy. Reverb, you can never get your legs to do that. Well, you just have to be flexible. You gotta do a lot of stretching. Tom, you like the bark brush. Cool, go make your own. They're so easy. Just go out, photograph some trees, make some brushes in Capture. Is my mouse in the way again? Oh yeah, whoops. Sorry about that. Tim, I did that yesterday. Well, you know, I'm sharing the screen via QuickTime, so I forget when the mouse goes there. Yeah, Tom, Adobe Capture is a daily helpful tool for you. I'm so glad to read that. Yeah, we haven't even scratched the surface with Capture. Go ahead and check out some videos on YouTube if you can find them. There are many about just various little Capture workflows. You can make 3D textures for your 3D art surface textures that you can map to 3D objects. Oh boy, you can make color themes, and those color themes will show up right here in Fresco. You see where it says recents is my color at the bottom. We already know that we have our recent colors, but if you tap on all, you have these libraries of colors, including like a little basic library that we have of themes here, but also ones that you've made in the past. If there are swatch libraries you've made, of course I haven't made that many myself, but they come in right here and you can work with those color themes too. Straight out of Capture, pretty cool. Yeah, and it can also do patterns, and geez, there's just so much stuff you can do. Can the brushes created in Fresco be transported to Photoshop? No, you can't make a brush. If you're talking about what I did with the watercolor, where I just made a shape and then with the multicolor swatch, just turn that into a temporary brush, those are locked into that document, or as a swatch really. It's sort of like a trick you can use to create that temporary brush, but it doesn't actually become an ABR file or a brush file that you can export. Although that is something that we have already talked about as a team, about a way to create brushes in Fresco and then export them. So don't worry, that is being worked on, and yes, it's a great idea. So we got to make that happen. I agree with you, Marisol. Alrighty, so now let me clear away some of this stuff. We got too much going on here. Remember, no layer limits in Fresco. You can make as many layers as you want, and no one's going to penalize you. All right, it's time for me to jump over to what we have for layer properties, because we didn't get a chance to talk about that yesterday. I want to just do a quick overview of what you can do with that and how that works. Alrighty, and the simplest way to do that is to make a shape. It's a basic shape. We'll do. Actually, why use a basic shape when you can use something more fun? So I'll look at the Halloween pack, and let's use this cat. All right, put the cat right there, and we're gonna fill it. Except actually I don't want to use black, so let's use a color. Is this going to be helpful for me demonstrating what happens with layer blending modes? All right, there's our orange cat. And then I'm going to select another shape. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to draw something on top. All right, here we have a layer that has this orange kitty, and we're going to make a new layer right above it. And I'll grab this purplish color, and I'll use the, I love this block stain brush. I'm going to use that. And we're just going to paint a swatch right over the cat like that. Now, that's actually a transparent brush. I shouldn't use that, sorry. Even though I do love that brush, I have to use something that's more solid. So I'm just going to paint like that. All right. Now, what are blending modes? If you open up your layer properties, see this up at the top right, just underneath the full screen mode we have for painting, right? I'm tapping on the top corner, top right corner. We have layers. You can show and hide your layers, right? But when you have a layer selected, you can tap on the icon just beneath it. It has like 3 sliders on it, and you get your layer properties. The most basic property you can adjust is the opacity of a layer. All right, so I'm on that purple swatch that I just painted. I'm just adjusting the opacity with this slider right here. You can also, if you want, oh, sorry, I was going to say something that's related to Photoshop. Never mind, ignore me. All right, above that, we have blend mode. Now, if you tap on blend modes, look at all these options we have, okay? It's about 18 different blend mode options. What blend modes do is they will affect the way in which the layer interacts with the layers that are beneath it in terms of its opacity, the way that the hue is going to be adjusted, the value, all kinds of things. And so just to demonstrate, if I were to tap on the third one down, which is multiply, by default, by the way, your layers are always set to normal. Well, see what just happened? On the white areas of the canvas, okay, where our cat is not painted, right? The white areas of the canvas, the purple remains the same color. However, once it touches that orange underneath, so it's being painted over that orange, what happens is the purple color is essentially being multiplied with that orange color to generate that nice brown that we get right there. And just to make things interesting, I'll grab another color just so you see what happens when I paint with it. And I'm going to make this color lighter than the orange of the cat. Okay, so there's a nice light color. Now I'm going to paint with that. See that? Over the white, nothing. It's what you'd expect. But over the cat, we're multiplying those two colors together, and we get that nice greenish, sort of neutral green right there. So multiply makes everything darker for one thing, but it also respects whatever the color is, whatever the hue is, and it's going to take that into account as well. Now, I'm just going to change these modes. You can see with color burn, what happens is that you're going to take that color and burn it into only the existing colors that are not white on the canvas. Linear burn is similar to multiply. Darker color is only going to allow darker colors, colors that are lighter than the color that's on your, the layer that you're affecting, or that you're setting, pardon me, to be visible. So because that light blue color I used is lighter than the orange, right? The orange is still going to dominate and it will therefore remain 100% visible. But because that purple color is darker, it's going to then wind up on top. All right, then you have versions like lighten it. You just lighten whatever's already there. And of course, it's going to tint it with that hue that you're using as well. And look at all these. I mean, I'm not going to go down all these. There are way too many. So play around with these and see how they can be used for your art. You could, so the ones that I use most often, just in case anybody's curious, are overlay and soft light, which is similar to one other. Soft light's like a less intense version of overlay. I use these a lot to affect colors in an illustration and try and sort of unify them, do a little more color harmony, and I'll set overlay and then I'll change the opacity to something like a 30 or 25, somewhere in that vicinity. I use that a lot. A lot of folks use color dodge to add highlights and things. I don't. I find it to be pretty bright and hard to control, but if you know what you're doing, you can do some pretty neat stuff with that. The other ones I use are hue, so it's just going to affect the overall hue of whatever is underneath it. And I'll also use, multiply, which is the first one we used. I'll use that for shadows when I'm painting a character, and just to demonstrate what I mean, I'll hide this layer and we'll create another layer. And I'm going to use the cat as a selection to paint inside. I did this earlier in the demo, so watch. I just tap on the layer and I tap on load as selection. So now it's selected that kitty cat. Come up here, grab my brush, and so I'll paint the shadows. So it's like some kind of a top light situation here, right? I'm not going to be too precious with this and make it too perfect, but you get the idea here. So maybe I want to have some shadows on the cat like that. And I'll set the mode to multiply and bring the opacity down. Okay, like that. That's a cool way to add a little dimension. So play around with those layer blend modes, and I think you'll have a good time. All right, so there's just enough time for me to show you masks and clipping masks because these are just so handy. Some people are on the mask team, others are on the clipping mask team. I say, why? Why do you have to be on one or the other? Just use them both for different things. But masking is something that comes straight out of the photography world or even the painting world. If people are, masking if you're using Mascoid or Frisket, if you're a watercolorist or acrylic painter. Or maybe you want to cut out masks with acetate, paint around them. But any kind of masking is where you're just blocking off some area of your image and painting outside of it. And we can do this in a really cool way in a digital environment where it's a non-destructive workflow. And the example I would give would be like this. Let's say behind this cat, okay, I decide that I want to paint a nice wash of sky. I'll grab the big fat watercolor brush. Ooh, there we go. Wash flat brush. Alrighty. Make it as big as I can. Crank up the water. All right, and I just freely paint. I'm not worried about the shape I'm making here. And then I want to go a little darker up at the top. And then maybe I want it to come down to like a more sort of a pinkish, purplish kind of color at the bottom. All right, and there's that shape I want to paint. All right, I'm not worried about being precise or anything like that. I'm just painting. All right, but now I want to mask out some parts of that with some trees, okay? So I could come over here, create a little landscape sort of shape with some trees. Like this. I want that to be in the back there. Maybe there's another one here. Alrighty, so that's the shape I want. Now what I could do is I could make that selection and then just delete or erase whatever's back there. All right, but once I've done that, that's a destructive thing, right? That means that I've now destroyed that part of the painted layer. So instead what I could do is I could mask it, all right? Now in this case, what I'm doing is I'm creating a mask of what I just painted. So remember that trick we have of inverting your selection? At the bottom menu, I have this more options. I can invert my selection. So now I've selected the area outside of the trees, okay? Everything outside of it. Now I hit mask. Okay. It says layer mask created, and if I look at the layer itself, it now has this red on it. And if you notice, the layer has a little button to the left of it. That means I can slide to look at my mask, the contents of my mask, and then see what actually is happening on the canvas. So what we're seeing on the canvas is the same as if I had erased away those parts of the sky. In actual fact, none of that has been erased. It has simply been masked, which means it has been hidden from view. So if I want to change the shape of a tree, or maybe I want to modify the tree slightly, if I say, oh, I don't like this branch on the right, look, I'll come to my mask and erase that branch. Well, look, my sky is still there, safe and sound. So the layer has remained completely unchanged. Those pixels that you painted are still there. This is a non-destructive way to work. So that is one example of using a mask, okay? So that's a cool way to hide something. You can also use a feature called clipping masks. A clipping mask is, remember how I did that shadow shape earlier by making a selection? Another way to do that would be to use a clipping mask. It'll make a selection of whatever is on that layer, So I have this kitty cat right now. If I hit clipping mask, okay, it's going to clip that shape to whatever's underneath. So now if I make, oops, hang on a minute. Let me go and I'll make a new layer to make this easier to see. All right, now, same as before. Why don't I do some kind of like a stripy pattern for this cat? I'll grab the Cezanne brush. That's a fun one. All right, just painting some stripes. Okay, cool. And I say, all right, I want those to match perfectly to the shape of the cat. All I have to do is make it a clipping mask, okay? And the way I do that is on the right, you'll see we have the plus sign for new layer, then the eyeball to hide or show the layer, and just underneath that, you have the option for a clipping mask. So what that does is it takes whatever you've painted on that layer, and it's going to clip it to the layer beneath it, and the shape of the layer beneath it, whatever pixels there are going to be what constrains what's visible in that layer above. But again, it is still a non-destructive way of working because I haven't erased the stripes. They are still there, right? And I can get rid of that, that mask if I want. 1 second. Where is it? There's a way to unclip it, and I'm not finding it. Shame on me. Shame on me. There, you just tap on the clipping again, that's all. Super simple. Couldn't be easier. All right, so I hope you understand what I'm doing here. I hope this makes sense. Masking, clipping masks. These are non-destructive workflows. They're really helpful. And there's some great little mini tutorials on these on the Creative Cloud YouTube account as well. And I recommend you check those out for more information. But there are so many different workflows. I made a very short video about hair where I had a person's face and I painted a lot of hair around it. And then I was able to, with just a mask, I was able to simply change the mask over and over and over again to create different hairstyles without having to repaint anything, without having to lose the original texture of the hair that I painted. That's another great way to use them. And yeah, these are very handy for those of you who get into a lot of layers, into a lot of shapes, and you want to be able to work in a non-destructive way. So last but not least, speaking of working non-destructively, check this out at the top of the image. We have the title, Fresco Demo, right? And you'll notice underneath it, it says last saved on December 3rd, 2020 at 11:31. Okay. I have the option to save it now if I want to just sort of take a snapshot. And so let's do this. Let's make our cat visible with the stripes, okay? And I'm going to say save now. And it saves it. Now I'm going to hide the cat. And I'm going to make this layer visible. Okay, and I'm going to say save now. All right, this is really cool. I'm going to go back to my home page and I want you to see something. If you tap on the 3 little dots under any of your images, you'll see View Version History. Now what this is doing is it's going to pull up every version of this image that you created ever. And so have you ever been in that situation where you say, oh gosh, I did a change to this illustration, but I don't like it anymore, but I've done so many steps forward, I can't undo back to where I was. I can't revert back to the state it was in 3 days ago. Now you can do that. All you have to do is go to your version history. So if you look today, we have different versions of this document, right? Remember we had at one point the tree that was visible. That was what I was working on at the time. So it saved all these versions, okay? And then yesterday we were doing some work as well. And it's going to pull up that in just a second here. Unless the screen was blank when I was busy chit-chatting about something, which it probably was. But if I say, yeah, I want to open this, revert to this version. I've now reverted to an earlier version of that document. Okay, and I say, yeah, great, thank you. Oh, it's not there yet, sorry. But yes, that's how it works. I'm just not allowing enough time for it to update. There we go. Look, it reverted back to that version from yesterday. And it was just 2 layers. I hadn't even started the demo yet. See what I mean? So there's a version history for all of your documents, and you can go through it and find what you need when you need it. I think that you'll find that to be extremely useful. All right, gang. So I will see you very shortly because later today I've got my draw along show, and I hope you'll join me for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's something we do every Wednesday and Thursday, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. Hope you enjoyed this Fresco demo from yesterday and today, a 2-parter. And I hope you'll go grab Fresco. Remember, it's free. So what better thing to do than get a perfectly amazing, robust, pro drawing and painting and illustration app for nothing and create some incredible art and go become a millionaire artist. I mean, it's as simple as that, right? So I've heard. All right, everybody take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your friends and family. Please remember to be kind. See you later. Ciao for now.